Hey guys, welcome back to the Midnight Movie. Today we're reviewing I guess it would be a Grindhouse classic. This was a really fun one. I, I've hesitated to do too much of the Italian productions of the Grindhouse films because I feel like they're not going to get a whole lot of views or traction, but I've decided, screw that. I want to review movies that I enjoy, that are fun, and that I think you guys should watch. We can't all just review the movies that are the most popular and that have huge followings. I think it's important if you're a cinephile, if you're just a movie lover, and frankly, I keep hearing from everybody how bored they are with today's cinema offerings. Well, hey, there's we literally have 100 years of movies to mine and really cool stuff. And yeah, so that's why I wanted to cover today an Italian grindhouse classic from 1978, The Inglorious Bastards. Not to be confused with Quentin Tarantino's 2009 masterpiece, Inglorious Bastards. Now, of course, this movie was an impetus and inspiration for Tarantino's absolute classic. And over the past 6 or so years that I've been deeply studying cinema, I've found that Tarantino and his interviews and his book Cinema Speculation have been a real wealth of uh, of knowledge and of places to explore. And so I've really gone down the rabbit hole of the movies that have influenced Tarantino and that he sort of grew up watching and enjoying. And when I looked up The Inglorious Bastards, I saw that there was this 1978 film. I'm like, wait a minute, so it's a remake? Not quite. Tarantino's movie takes inspiration from it, but it's not a direct remake. Both films are about a ragtag group of soldiers that are tasked with a specific sort of super dangerous mission that they may or may not survive in the struggle to end the Third Reich. But the characters are different in both movies. The end, well, the missions sort of differ a bit, but they're kind of in the same vein of, again, ragtag sort of outcast renegades trying to redeem themselves with a dangerous mission. And in The Inglorious Bastards 1978, directed by Enzo G. Castellari, we have Bo Svensson, who has a really great screen presence. He's kind of like the team leader, the captain. He is a Swedish American actor who also is fluent in German, so he comes in real handy in this movie. We have Peter Hooten, the great Fred Williamson. That alone was enough to get me to watch this. I'm a big Fred Williamson fan. Those of you who don't know who Fred is a mainstay of exploitation films from the 60s and 70s, black exploitation, but he also pivoted into doing a bunch of Italian productions throughout the 70s and the 80s. And he's an ex-professional football player, defensive back, played in the AFL, which doesn't exist anymore, and ended up becoming a leading man in black exploitation and action films. Well, anyways, he is all kinds of badass. If you guys don't know who Fred Williamson is, check him out in this and every other film that he's in. A bunch of his movies are free on our favorite Tubi. Again, you just register there with your email. They don't spam you or anything. But yeah, so Inglorious Bastards 1978. This movie is basically it's set in France in 1944, and you have American soldiers that are basically going to get sent to the stockade. Each one of them has kind of their own problem. They're either legitimately bad or kind of got stuck in a bad situation. So you have American soldiers. One, you have Burl, who's a deserter, so he's kind of a coward, doesn't want to be there, doesn't want to be fighting for the Allies against the Nazis. You have Nick Colasanti, who's a petty thief. He's a really fun character. He's got a mustache and he's got long hair. He's very much you can tell he's an odd man out, and he's kind of the comic relief as well. He's nicknamed Assassin. And you have Tony, who is a mutineer, and Lieutenant Yeager, who, after refusing to comply with orders to kill, among others, women and children, he's also sentenced to death. And basically, they team up with Fred Williamson's character. They're ambushed by Luftwaffe, which I believe is the German Air Force, or the Messerschmitt. I believe it's the Messerschmitt, and they basically break away from their captives, being captives of the U.S. military, and they're like, "Screw this! We got it. We're like 100 miles to Switzerland. Switzerland is neutral, supposedly neutral. We would learn more later how neutral they were, but their goal is to get to freedom and get to Sweden, that's a neutral country, and I guess ride out the rest of the war." Which, I mean, when you really think about it, it's like, how cowardly is that? Well, these guys are charming enough that you kind of don't really mind. They do get away from this ambush. They kill some Nazis, and they kill some of their captives at the same time that are trying to kill them. And they make their way to a villa in the countryside, where they then find another, I guess, a Nazi deserter. And Bo Svensson, who is the, again, Lieutenant Yeager, who speaks German, talks to him. And apparently this Nazi soldier is kind of like, "I don't want to do this either." So they kind of team up. And from there, they're slowly making their way through the countryside, through various German checkpoints, getting into fights and battles. And it's a lot of fun. It doesn't sound particularly complex, but along the way, they meet women, they meet other sort of interesting characters, they meet the partisans, the French partisans that are part of the French resistance, and it's just a fun movie. It is not going to win any Oscars because it's one of those sort of Italian productions that were kind of a part of the exploitation circuit. For those of you that aren't familiar, Italy, I guess it really kind of began with the spaghetti westerns of the 60s, although those were really beautifully done. Sergio Leone was such a genius, and the level of taking the craft seriously really gave us incredible films. It launched the career of Clint Eastwood. Not every Italian production from the 60s through the 70s and the 80s would be like that, even though these Italians were incredibly good at what they did, and the shots, and it always looked good. The Italians, they're all about style. We know this. But sometimes the narrative was a little weak or weird. Sometimes the acting wasn't quite there. Inglorious Bastards really stands out. It does have a 100% rating on Rotten Tomatoes, which kind of surprised me. I sometimes agree with Rotten Tomatoes, and there's times where there's movies that I absolutely love that have like a 6%. Sometimes it's just because nobody's reviewing it. And also movies that I think are fantastic that are just not well received for whatever reason. But in this case, I do think that Inglorious Bastards deserves its 100% score because it's just a solid actioner. It's a solid World War II movie. And again, it being an Italian production, meant for the Grindhouse circuit, probably not meant to get any major awards. The characters are so unique and interesting and charming. It's compelling, even if a few of the circumstances they fall into over the course of their adventure through the film might seem a little fantastic. There's not much of that. I feel like there's always some moments in certain Italian films where something happens and you're kind of like, "Ah, geez, really?" That doesn't really happen in Inglorious Bastards. These guys, they're deserters. They're Fred Williamson's character, I think, is probably the most noble one. He basically is being sent to the stockade because he was being bullied by a racist sergeant. And, well, he either I can't remember if he beat the crap out of the guy or if he killed him. But, I don't really mind Fred taking matters into his own hands. Here we are fighting like the most hyper-uber racist of all time, the Nazis. And this guy's getting a hard time from his sergeant. Screw that guy. You go on, Fred. And so he's kind of, again, I love all these characters. Fred's one of my favorites. But you see a nuance to these characters that you don't really necessarily get in a lot of Italian co-productions. The narratives tend to sometimes be pretty slim. You don't have a whole lot of three-dimensional characters. That's not the case with Inglorious Bastards. These guys really are well-marbled, interesting, complex characters, even if it isn't dug into too deep. It's established pretty early on. And again, you've got a deserter, you've got a thief, you've got technically a murderer, and not to spoil anything, but they do eventually come upon a contact within the Allied command, and they end up posing as these guys that are tasked with a very, very dangerous mission. So again, the parallels with Tarantino's 2009 film, and it continues to build. You know, in the beginning, they're just sort of this ragtag group of guys. They're sort of, you know, the odd men out. Very interesting. You know, they're able to escape because of this attack. You know, they're trying to make their way through a very sort of dangerous countryside. You know, meeting other very interesting characters and resistance members. Then they're tasked with a mission, and then the movie really just goes balls out at that point. It's just fun. And I think we're missing some of that in film today. I think it's really important to, in a time where we are jacking way too much information into our heads on not just an hourly basis, but almost a minute-by-minute basis about politics and economics. And these things are all super important, and we should be informed, and we should gather information from multiple sources to know what's going on in the world. I do think it's making a lot of people miserable. And part of the reason I'm really going to be focusing really hard on some of the more fun stuff on my channel. Every now and then I will dip into something more serious, but I think there's plenty of people doing that, and probably people who are way more qualified than I. And I think you got to remember that life is for living, and life should be fun. And the Inglorious Bastards from 1978 is just fun. It's a good time at the movies. And right now, as of this recording, it is free to watch on YouTube at the, I believe it's Film Clips or Film and Clips channel on YouTube. If you just type in The Inglorious Bastards 1978 full movie, it'll pop up. And it's also, I think, on Plex. Plex is another streaming app. God, there's like a million of them now. But on Plex, you will get ads. So just, you know, be aware. I think Inglorious Bastards is one of those movies that does occasionally, it kind of makes the rounds through the different streamers and does pop up on Tubi and other places. But if you just kind of want a fun, sort of hard-nosed, gritty, interesting, fun, charming, compelling, non-traditional sort of war flick, The Inglorious Bastards from 1978 it's right up your alley. Movies should be fun. Life should be fun. So check it out and let me know what you thought. If you've seen the movie, you know, if you think it's earned its 100% fresh rating at Rotten Tomatoes, if you think it's as great as I do, or do you think, no, this is Italian schlock, you should watch something else? Please let me know in the comments below. Like, share, and I'll see you all in the next one.